I'm Samantha, 29, a woman whose life was a perfectly crafted architectural blueprint until my sister and fiancé ripped it to shreds. The pieces of my happy ever after are now scattered at my feet, sharp and ugly, a testament to a betrayal so profound it has redefined every relationship I ever held dear. Before all of this, before the lies and the quiet deceit, my world was a vibrant, hopeful place. I was a successful architect, my days filled with the beautiful chaos of turning dreams into tangible structures. My nights, however, belonged entirely to Liam. We had been together since high school, a love story everyone in our small town knew by heart. He was my rock, my future, and my safe harbor. We were a week away from sending out our wedding invitations, the date set for a golden September afternoon. Our wedding, much like our relationship, was meant to be a classic, timeless affair. My sister, Clara, was to be my maid of honor. She was 2 years younger than me, and while we shared a family name, we were worlds apart. Clara was an event planner, a whirlwind of energy and ambition. Our relationship, however, had always been a delicate dance around her insecurities. Growing up, our parents, especially our mother, Eleanor, seemed to praise Clara's every achievement, no matter how small, while my accomplishments were often met with a quiet nod. I won a scholarship to a prestigious university for architecture, and my mother's comment was, "That's nice, but are you sure you won't get too stressed?" The same year, Clara won a second-place ribbon in a local baking competition, and our mother threw a party. I brushed it off then, telling myself that Clara just needed more validation than I did. I was the older sister, it was my job to be the strong one. This pattern of subtle favoritism continued into adulthood. Once, when I got a promotion to lead a major project, my mother's first question was if it would take time away from my family life, while she gushed about Clara's new client for a celebrity birthday party, calling it a truly impressive career move. The small hurts piled up, but I always pushed them down, convinced that familial love would smooth over the cracks. I believed in us as a family, as a unit. I was wrong. The cracks were not just on the surface, they ran all the way through the foundation. The first signs of the decay were so subtle I dismissed them as wedding stress. Liam and Clara, my fiancé and my maid of honor, were spending an unusual amount of time together. It started innocently enough, they said. Planning the seating chart, coordinating with vendors, and Clara just needing a guy's opinion, on a surprise for me. I was so caught up in the excitement of planning my dream wedding that I didn't see the red flags for what they were. I was too busy choosing floral arrangements and cake flavors to notice the way Liam's eyes would linger on Clara a second too long, or the way they would share a quick, conspiratorial glance across the dinner table. They had a new language of inside jokes and private texts, a secret world I was locked out of. I'd catch them on their phones, laughing at something I couldn't see. "What's so funny?" I'd ask, trying to be playful. Liam would quickly put his phone down, a flustered look on his face. Just a meme Clara sent. He'd say, a little too quickly. Clara would just smile a knowing smile and say, "You wouldn't get it." It made me feel like an outsider in my own life. A few months before the wedding, I came home early from work to find Clara and Liam in the kitchen. They weren't just talking, they were whispering, their heads close together over Liam's phone. As soon as I walked in, they jumped apart as if they'd been caught stealing from a cookie jar. "Hey, babe," Liam said, his voice a little strained, "just finalizing some details for your bachelorette party with Clara." Clara just nodded, avoiding my eyes. My heart gave a little lurch of unease, but I pushed it back down. They were planning a surprise for me. Of course they would be secretive. That was normal, right? The final, undeniable sign came in the form of a forgotten phone. We were at our parents' house for a Sunday dinner. Liam had gone to the garage to help my dad with something, and his phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a message from Clara. My stomach tightened into a knot. I knew I shouldn't, but my hand reached for it anyway, a feeling of dread washing over me. The message read, "Last night was amazing. I can't wait to tell our baby about the great adventure of their parents someday." The world tilted on its axis. My breath caught in my throat. I read the words again and again, until they burned themselves into my mind. Last night, our baby, parents, my fiancé, and my sister, the puzzle pieces, the strange glances, the whispered conversations, the inside jokes, they all slammed into place with a horrifying, sickening finality. My carefully constructed world shattered, not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating buzz of a text message. My hands trembled as I placed Liam's phone back on the coffee table. The words on the screen had branded me, changing my reality in an instant. I felt a cold numbness spread through my body, a shock so deep it left me hollow. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled out of the living room, a ghost in my own home, and found my mother in the kitchen, bustling about, completely oblivious. The normalcy of it all felt like a mockery. How could the world be continuing as if nothing had happened? How could the sun still be shining, and the scent of my mother's cooking still be in the air, when my life had just come to a brutal, violent end? I needed to be alone. I retreated to my childhood bedroom, the one place that had always felt safe, and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress lumpy and familiar, and tried to make sense of what I had just seen. 6 months. They had been doing this for 6 months. The business trip Liam took to the city, the weekend Clara spent at a friend's place, the late night calls they would take away from me. It wasn't wedding planning. It was a secret life, a dark mirror of the one I thought I was living. I felt a wave of nausea, a baby. They were having a baby. It wasn't just a fling, a drunken mistake. It was a complete and utter replacement of my future. The wedding dress hanging in my closet, the invitations on my desk, the shared dreams of a house and children. It was all a lie. I was a fool, a supporting character in my own tragedy. A knock on the door startled me. It was Clara. "Samantha, Mom says dinner's ready. You okay?" she asked, her voice laced with a concern that I now recognized as a performance. The thought of facing her, of seeing the woman who had smiled in my face while destroying my life, made me sick. I didn't answer. I just stayed silent, my hand gripping the edge of the bed, knuckles white. She knocked again, more insistently this time. "Samantha, what's wrong?" The act of feigned innocence was too much. I wanted to scream, to break something, to tear down the walls that held us all together. But I couldn't, not yet. I had to wait. I had to be sure. I needed to see it, hear it from them. The finality of the truth had to be spoken to be truly real. The confrontation was a nightmare I will never forget. I waited until everyone was seated for dinner, the atmosphere still thick with the deceptive peace of a normal Sunday. Liam was at my side, my mother and father across from us, and Clara was seated next to our dad, her face serene and innocent. They were all there, the entire cast of my personal tragedy, gathered around the table. My voice came out shaky at first, but with each word it grew stronger, colder. "I saw the message on your phone, Liam." The entire table went silent. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. Liam's face went white. Clara's serene mask cracked, revealing a flicker of panic. "What message, Samantha?" Liam stammered, his eyes darting to Clara. "The one from Clara, about your baby," I said, my voice dead. The silence that followed was deafening. My father, bless his heart, looked from me to Liam, utterly lost. My mother, Eleanor, stared at Clara with a look of dawning horror, and Clara, the event planner who was so good at arranging beautiful things, finally broke. The tears started to stream down her face, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of a woman caught, her secret laid bare for all to see. Liam tried to speak, to lie, but the words wouldn't come. I looked at Clara, my sister, my maid of honor, and she finally confirmed it all. "I'm pregnant, Samantha. It's Liam's. We're getting married." The words were like a physical blow. The lie wasn't a secret affair. It was an entire life built behind my back. My mother, Eleanor, started to cry, her head in her hands. My father just sat there, stunned. I looked at Liam, the man I had loved for so long. He couldn't meet my eyes. He just sat there, a silent statue of a man who had sold a decade of our life together for a 6-month affair. The wedding, the invitations, the dreams, it was all a sham. They had taken my future and built their own on top of its ruins. The next few weeks were a blur of pain, anger, and utter disbelief. I packed my belongings from the apartment Liam and I shared, my hands moving mechanically, a hollow ache in my chest. He tried to talk to me, to apologize, but his words were empty, a cheap attempt to absolve himself. "It was a mistake, Samantha," he'd say, but the lie was so thin I could see right through it. A 6-month mistake that resulted in a baby and a secret marriage. I asked, my voice raw with grief. He had no answer. Clara and I did not speak. She sent me a text message that was so tone, deaf and self. Pitying it made my blood boil. "I'm so sorry this happened, Samantha. It wasn't what we planned, what they planned." The audacity, the arrogance of it all was breathtaking. They had planned to destroy my life, and they had succeeded. The most painful part of the fallout was my mother, Eleanor. I expected her to be my rock, to defend me, to be outraged on my behalf. Instead, she became a peacemaker, a mediator for a conflict that should have never existed. "Samantha, you have to understand." She said to me one afternoon, her eyes pleading, "Clara is your sister. She's pregnant. A baby is coming into this world. We have to be a family." My blood ran cold. A family? Mom, they betrayed me. They destroyed my wedding, my relationship, and you're telling me to understand. Her words confirmed a lifetime of subtle hurts. She was prioritizing Clara, the pregnant, needy one, over me, the wronged daughter. The favoritism that had always been a whisper in the back of my mind was now a deafening roar. My mother's behavior was the final nail in the coffin. It wasn't just Liam and Clara who had betrayed me. My own mother, the woman who was supposed to love me unconditionally, was choosing the happiness of my sister and her betrayer over my own profound pain. I realized then that my life had been built on a series of foundations that were rotten from the start. I was no longer just grieving the loss of my fiancé and my sister. I was grieving the loss of the family I thought I had, the mother I thought would always have my back, and the love I thought was unconditional. The anger and grief I felt were not just for the betrayal, but for the lifetime of little slights that had culminated in this one devastating act. In the weeks that followed, I went no contact with Liam, Clara, and my mother. I was a ghost, a shell of the woman I used to be. My father was the only one who still called, his voice filled with a quiet sympathy. He couldn't understand my mother's behavior either. "She's always been this way with Clara," he admitted one day on the phone. "She's always coddled her." His words didn't offer a full explanation, but they were a small validation of my experience. One rainy afternoon, while I was helping my father pack up some old boxes in the garage, I stumbled upon a trunk of my mother's old things. Tucked away at the bottom, beneath old photo albums and dusty trinkets, I found an old, leather-bound journal. It was my mother, Eleanor's. I shouldn't have read it, but I couldn't stop myself. As I turned the brittle, yellowed pages, I found entries from the time before I was born. The writing was elegant, the handwriting a stark contrast to the desperation in the words. My mother had been in a relationship with a man before my father, a tumultuous and passionate affair. She had gotten pregnant with his child, a secret she had kept from everyone. But the relationship ended, and the man left her. She had been devastated, alone, and pregnant. She wrote about her fears, her shame, and her immense sense of loss. She had considered putting the baby up for adoption, but couldn't go through with it. She eventually married my father, who loved her unconditionally and accepted the child, my older brother, as his own. But that wasn't the end of the story. The baby had been stillborn. My mother, in her grief, had suffered a complete emotional breakdown. The journal entries became more sparse after that, filled with a deep, abiding sadness. A few years later, I was born. Then came Clara. The pages revealed a secret my mother had carried her whole life. My father had once told me that my mother had lost a child before me, but he hadn't known the full story. As I read her journal, it became clear that my mother had secretly blamed herself for the death of her first baby. She had poured all of her love and a deeply misguided sense of overprotection into Clara, who was born not long after her tragedy, as if to make up for the love she couldn't give to a child she had lost. This new information didn't excuse Clara's actions or my mother's betrayal, but it provided a context, a reason for her favoritism that wasn't born of a lack of love for me, but of a deep, unhealed wound. The discovery of my mother's journal didn't change the past, but it did change my perspective. It didn't make the pain go away, but it gave me a new understanding of the dynamics that had always existed in my family. Clara wasn't just a spoiled, insecure sister. She was the recipient of a lifetime of misplaced guilt and overcompensation. My mother's favoritism wasn't a rejection of me, but a desperate attempt to heal a wound that had never closed. It didn't excuse their behavior, but it allowed me to move from a place of blind, visceral pain to a place of informed, resolute anger. I knew then that I couldn't be a part of their lives, not as a support system, not as a sister or daughter, not as anything. The trust was gone, the foundation destroyed. I got a new apartment and a new job, taking a contract position in a different city. I needed a clean break, a new landscape to rebuild myself on. My father supported my decision, even helping me pack and move. He was the one constant, the one person in my family who had loved me for who I was, without conditions or secret agendas. I started therapy, a difficult but necessary step towards healing. I learned to talk about my anger and my grief, and to recognize that my feelings were valid. I learned that I was not a supporting character in my own story. I was the protagonist. I began to rediscover the person I was before the betrayal, a woman who was strong, talented, and worthy of love. The final goodbye to my old life came in the form of an official wedding announcement in the local paper. Liam and Clara, my ex-fiancé and my sister. I saw the names side by side, and instead of the cold, sick feeling I had once felt, I felt a quiet sense of peace. I had a choice. I could spend my life consumed by anger and bitterness, or I could choose to heal, to move on, to build a new and better life for myself. I chose the latter. I was no longer Samantha, the betrayed sister. I was Samantha, the survivor, the architect of my own future. After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories. We are all human. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon.